G'day friends, family, fellow patriots. Lord Stompy here in Adelaide, South Australia. Welcome to the show. Now today I would like to talk about the unofficial state religion of every Western nation at this point in time. Now the unofficial religion of all our Western nations is not obvious. It's not even particularly obvious to nationalists and patriots, but when I say what it is, you will all immediately understand. The unofficial religion of your Western nation is liberalism. Think about it. All right, this really is the case. Now, what exactly is liberalism? And how is it that liberalism has become an actual religion without being a religion? See, this is the $1 million prize right there. Okay, so here in the modern day Western nations, ever since the end of World War II, we saw a very, very rapid decline in patriotism, nationalism, traditionalism, and old school Christian values. Old school blood and soil Christian values. And you saw the rise in the place of our old traditional regimes that operated in the West for nearly 2,000 years. You saw the rise of a rampant atheistic neoliberalism. And it was this atheistic neoliberalism that took the place of the old-fashioned Christian patriot values that used to rule our Western nations with a rod of iron. So, when you think about it that way, that liberalism essentially, the first thing liberalism did was it entered the scene as a replacement for our traditional religion and our traditional values. So right away, straight off the bat, liberalism was a replacement for the religion that we used to have here in the West. Now, with the rise of modern liberalism, essentially, once we left our traditional way of life and our traditional old school Christian values, essentially modern liberalism was it was atheistic, but it was anything goes. The way that liberalism very quickly usurped the place of traditionalism in the West was when the boomer generation were coming of age, when they were right at the point in their lives where they were a little bit too young to think for themselves, but they were getting old enough to vote and to have sex. Two very important milestones in people's life. You know, when you're old enough to vote and have sex, that's when your world changes a lot. So when the boomers were at the highly impressionable age of their teens, and they were about to hit the age where they could vote and have sex, along comes modern liberalism, and basically modern liberalism was able to usurp the minds and the souls, the hearts of the boomer generation. Now, if you usurp somebody's mind, that's a really big thing. Right? To have a high level of mental control over someone's psychological activity. You're basically changing the way they're going to make decisions, you're changing the way they look at the world. But if you hijack their soul, which is something deeper than the mind, the mind itself is generally based around decision making, logic, worldview. The soul of man, that comes more from your foundational emotions. It comes... The soul of man comes from the same place where blood and soil and honour come from. And it's a little bit of a different place to the mind if you think about it. The soul is where a man's heart it's where a man's heart resides, and it's where he plants his feet on the ground. So it's one thing to hijack the mind, but if you hijack people's deep emotions, you have hijacked their foundation for life. And that foundation for life, the place where blood, soil, honour, and tribal connectedness comes from, when you've hijacked that place, basically that's the place where deep religion comes from. That's where the place where men's deepest convictions come from. In your mind, you can compute all sorts of logical outcomes and entertain a wide variety of different worldviews, depending on where you're at in your life and where you're at in your mind. But your emotions, your deep foundational emotions, they are your attachment to your tribe, to your soil, to your blood. Once somebody messes with those, that's an even deeper problem. It's an even deeper hurt to try and rectify. When you warp somebody's foundational sense of identity, then you have truly messed with them on a soul level, basically on a kind of cellular level, really. And when you've messed with somebody on that deeper level, that person you've messed with that person's religiosity. The place of the soul is where the very deep religious feelings in man come from. And that's the worst thing about liberalism. It's actually a really, really deep foundational problem we have, we European people. Our very souls at a very deep level have been attacked, and the main weapon that our enemy has used has been modern liberalism. We've grown up with essentially with the rootless cosmopolitan images and ideology of modern liberalism as our deep foundational soul core. And it's affected everything about European people, and it's affected the entire European nations from top to bottom. The seriousness of this hijacking of Western man's souls, mainly using the processes of modern liberalism, is now that you're thinking about it, this is plain to see. The level of damage it's wrought upon us as a people is beyond calculation. Our very civilizations, all our nations are collapsing as I speak. Our people are now in an existential crisis, the likes of which has never been known. And the reason for this is the boomers. When the boomer generation were coming of age, not just their minds, but their souls were hijacked. And that was the first generation that essentially all signed a deal with the devil that they give up their traditional way of life, their traditional religion, their traditional culture, their nations, their wealth, their families, their sexuality, their intimacy, their tribal bonds. Do you see now what liberalism has done to our people? This is no small thing. And the problem is we're also inculcated with the religion of liberalism, with the cult of liberalism, that it has become part of us. It's a very, very deep part of our actual identity. It's our worldview. It's our zeitgeist of this age. And even when we start realizing the full seriousness of the problem of modern liberalism, that's a huge step to come to terms with. But then the next step is equally hard, probably even harder, and that is actually ridding oneself of the poison of the Jewish liberalism which we have ingested. Now, for me to illustrate just how bad liberalism is, I'll choose a couple of examples. Now, there's a very popular YouTube guy, and he's a Norwegian guy, or at least he's a Nordic kind of guy, and he styles himself as a Viking pagan. His name's Bjorn Bull Hansen. Okay, he's got a very large following, and he claims he's this disillusioned guy who's he's been around a long time. He makes lots of very popular videos. He claims he's totally disillusioned with modern society, and he's gone back to these pagan Viking ways as a way of reconnecting with his roots. Okay, so quite often does videos wandering around Nordic forests, and he lives in some quite remote town, and he lives in Often he lives in a little hut that he built, a little off-grid hut that he built in a forest. He has a large family, a wife and children. Good on him for doing all that. And, I have no problem with somebody trying to get back to their roots. But then, this guy, he claims he's gone right back deep to his roots. Now, one of his videos once, he said, not that long ago, he lived in a much bigger city. And then all the foreign immigrants were moving into the city. And he said it became kind of annoying, and then it became dangerous because of these immigrants. It was dangerous for his wife and children. So what did he do? He ran away to a very remote small town and now spends most of his time wandering around the forest, living in some tiny little off-grid hut. Now, excuse me, this guy claims that he's gone back to the deep roots of his wild pagan Viking ancestors. Now, the original Vikings, if they have only got a few foreigners come to one of their cities, like literally say a dozen, and these foreigners started behaving badly, the original Vikings would have picked up swords, axes, whatever they had handy, and the foreign invaders would have been dead before sunup the next day. That's a true Viking. A true Viking is ferocious. They are filled with an incredible fighting spirit, and they will protect their tribe, their women, their children, and their lands with their lives. I mean, the Vikings were berserkers. They were renowned for being incredible die-hard warriors, some of the most incredible warriors they've ever seen. And yet you've got this Bull Hansen guy who wanders around telling everyone how he's this pagan back to his roots. And he's this nice guy who the moment things got a little bit hard, he ran away as far as possible. Now, that is very well and good for Mr. Bull Hansen. But, what he's doing is selling this pagan ideology and lifestyle to all these young people. Now, how is every young person in his Nordic nation ever going to run away from all their cities because of these foreigners and all spend lives like him, wandering around forests and living in off-grid huts? This is just, the folly. This is, Mr. Bull Hansen hasn't thought this through. Not at all. And the reason he hasn't is because he's liberal. So as much as he claims he's going back to his pagan roots, he can't actually be a real Viking because that's against liberalism. If he picked up swords and started chopping off the heads of his enemies, which is what his ancestors would do, and back in those days, that would have been seen as the right thing to do. Mr. Bull Hansen can't do any of that now. So all he can do is talk on a YouTube channel and have millions of views. And basically, as much as he seems like a nice enough guy, he's just a glorified LARPer. Just to make a further example of this, the other day he put up a video because he used to complain about all the woke ideology and blah, 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 which, every vaguely sane person has complained about forever, right? Mr. Bull Hansen is now put out a video complaining that the red pill has gone too far. I was like, what? The red pill has gone too far. It was like, now he's complaining that, young people are going too far with being red-pilled. This guy's meant to be a Viking. Yawn, Mr. Yawn Hansen. But this is the problem. Liberalism is a religion, right? It's a cult. It's an ideology. It usurps your mind. It usurps your soul. And then here is the key point. Liberalism will allow you to be a pagan. It'll allow you to be a Muslim. It'll allow you to even be a conservative Christian. But the thing you have to do above all of those identities is be a good liberal. The overarching ideology of the West and nearly everyone in it is liberalism. So it doesn't matter whether you are anything of a diverse array. You could be Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist. As long as you obey the liberal ideology, then you can be anything you want. That was the deal with liberalism. But then ultimately, no matter what you are actually obeying liberalism and the liberal system above all else. Liberalism uber alles. Hey, what? So that is where we're at the moment. And for a long time now, about 3 or 4 years at least, I just openly tell people I'm completely illiberal. I tell them I hate liberalism. I tell them that I'm a nationalist. I tell them that I'm a conservative, old school, traditionalist Christian. And I tell them about how much I love Europe and my European people and our European traditions and cultures. I'm proud. I'm proud to be a liberal, and I suggest the rest of you do the same. Don't just call out liberalism. Proudly be a liberal like me. Okay. Thank you for listening. God bless. Deus Volt.